I broke a $100,000 vase. My daughter kicked me out. But nobody was expecting what I said next. I always knew I was a burden. I could feel it in the way my daughter, Rachel, looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. The tight smile. The half-second pause before responding. The tone she used when she said, "Mom." Living with her and Jonathan wasn't something I ever planned. But after Harold passed, and I couldn't afford the rent anymore, I didn't have many choices. I sold our little house and gave them half the money to help with their new place. It was Jonathan's idea that I move in, said I'd have my own room, more company, and wouldn't have to worry about bills. It sounded reasonable, but over time, I started noticing the shift. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. At first, it was small. I wasn't invited to dinner out with them anymore. I'd find out they'd gone to the movies or to some gathering after the fact. Then it was bigger things. Rachel started asking me to stay in my room during her book club meetings. Jonathan began locking the liquor cabinet when I was alone in the house. I never touched a drop. I told myself I was imagining things, that they were just adjusting, that it was temporary. But deep down, I knew. I wasn't wanted. I was tolerated. The day it happened, it was raining. The kind of slow, steady rain that taps at the window but doesn't stop. Jonathan had just gotten back from a business trip. He had this new thing, collecting antique vases from Europe, overpriced pieces that sat on shelves no one ever touched. That morning, Rachel had asked me to dust the living room while they were out shopping. I always tried to keep the house clean, even though it wasn't mine. It gave me something to do. I remember using a cloth and moving carefully around his collection, but my knee gave out, just a twitch, and my shoulder bumped into the cabinet. I heard the crash before I saw it. The blue and white porcelain vase, the one he said was worth more than a car, had shattered into a dozen sharp pieces on the floor. I stood there frozen, gripping the edge of the cabinet, my heart pounding in my chest like it was trying to break out. I thought maybe I could fix it. Maybe he wouldn't notice. But as I bent down to pick up the pieces, I sliced my palm. Blood smeared across the tile. I sat on the floor with my hand wrapped in a paper towel when they came back. Rachel walked in first. She didn't notice right away, but Jonathan did. His eyes landed on the empty space in the cabinet. He stopped in his tracks. "Where is it?" he asked. Rachel followed his gaze. "What happened?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I just held up the bloody towel. "You broke it?" Jonathan's voice was flat. "It was an accident," I whispered. My knee gave out. "I didn't mean—" Jonathan stepped forward. "That vase cost $100,000. Do you understand that?" Rachel's eyes widened. "Mom, I was careful," I said, trying to breathe. "It was just my leg." He turned to Rachel. "This is exactly what I was talking about." "Don't do this here," she said, trying to hush him. "No," he snapped. "No more pretending. She shouldn't be here. We've bent over backward." "I gave you the money for the down payment," I said quietly. Rachel turned to me. Don't bring that up." My legs felt like they were filled with sand. I stood up slowly, using the armchair for support. "I'll pay you back," I told Jonathan. "I can sell." "You're not paying back anything," he said, walking to the kitchen. "You don't have anything." Rachel just stood there. "We need space, Mom. I think maybe it's time." "Time?" I asked. She didn't look me in the eye. "For you to find somewhere else, somewhere that can give you the help you need." "Help," I repeated. "Because I fell?" She sighed. "This isn't working anymore." Jonathan came back with a trash bag. "We'll pack up your things." It felt like I was watching someone else's life unravel. I couldn't move. My hand throbbed. The smell of porcelain dust and blood filled the air. I sat back down, my knees weak. I didn't cry. "Not yet. I'll call a cab," Rachel said softly, almost like she was doing me a favor. I looked around. The house I helped pay for. The family I raised. The silence felt louder than their voices. An hour later, I was sitting in the back seat of a yellow cab, my overnight bag in my lap and a thick bandage on my hand. Rachel had given me an envelope with some cash. Jonathan didn't say goodbye, didn't ask where we were going. I just asked the driver to stop when we got near a grocery store. I couldn't afford a hotel. I knew that already. That night, I slept in the back seat of my car, parked behind a church. It was cold, and the rain hadn't stopped. I used my coat as a blanket and stared at the ceiling of the car, listening to it drum above me. I kept hearing Rachel's voice. This isn't working anymore. No apology, no hesitation, just done. When morning came, I walked into a diner and asked for coffee. The woman behind the counter looked at me twice, then poured it without charging. She didn't ask questions. I think she knew. Maybe she'd seen it before. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing. I couldn't go back. I spent 3 nights in that car. I didn't tell anyone where I was, not that I had many people to tell. Most of my old friends had either moved away or passed on. Rachel had slowly replaced the rest with her silence. On the 4th morning, I woke up with my neck stiff and my back aching from the cramped space. I walked into a public restroom at the gas station down the street and cleaned up as best as I could. My hand was still sore from the cut, but the bleeding had stopped. I checked my bank balance at the ATM by the counter. $212.48. That was it. That was all I had left after helping Rachel and Jonathan. I walked back to the car and sat in the driver's seat with the door open. The morning breeze was cool and dry. I started making a list in my head of what I could sell, but the truth was, I didn't have anything left to sell. I had already sold my jewelry years ago to help Rachel with her first business idea, an online clothing store that never made it past the website design. I had nothing. And yet, the part that hurt the most wasn't what I had lost. It was that Rachel had looked me in the face and told me to leave, like I was no longer useful, like a piece of old furniture that was taking up too much space. After Harold died, I'd gone into a fog for months. It was Rachel who'd insisted I move in. "It'll be good for everyone," she had said. "The boys will love having Grandma around." And they did. At least at first. I helped with homework. I made their lunches. I watched them when Rachel and Jonathan traveled for work. I cleaned the house and made dinner most nights. But over time, I stopped being Grandma and started being her mother. They stopped calling me to the table. I was no longer needed. That morning, I was sitting in the car trying to decide if I should go to a shelter when someone knocked on my window. I jumped. A woman, probably in her early 60s, was standing outside with a tote bag and a small dog, on a leash. "You okay?" she asked. I rolled down the window. "I'm fine." "You've been here a few days," she said. "I walk this lot every morning. I recognize cars." I didn't know what to say. "You living in there?" she asked, not unkindly. I nodded. She looked at me for a second, then said, "There's a place down the block, corner of Linwood and 12th. It's a church, but they run a senior drop-in center. You should go. They won't ask questions." I hesitated, but I ended up going. I followed her down the street in my car, parked, and walked into a plain brick building with a wooden sign out front that said, Grace House. Inside, there was a table with fresh fruit, coffee, and a few people quietly playing cards. A woman named Clara ran the place. She looked me up and down, handed me a cup of coffee, and asked if I'd eaten. I lied and said yes. She didn't believe me and gave me a sandwich anyway. I stayed there most of the day. Clara didn't ask what had happened. She just gave me a blanket and let me sit in the corner. When I told her I didn't have anywhere to go, she handed me a list of low-income housing options and told me to call the next morning. That night, instead of sleeping in my car, I was offered a cot in the back room. It wasn't much, but it was safe. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, bus rides, and waiting rooms. Clara helped me apply for senior housing. The wait list was long. "Could be weeks, could be months," she said. "But I'll put in a good word." One afternoon, while organizing my few things in a donated suitcase, I found an envelope tucked between 2 old documents. It was from Harold. I had forgotten all about it. He had written it just before his surgery. "In case I don't make it he had said. I never opened it because I couldn't stand the idea of reading a goodbye. But now, sitting alone on a borrowed cot, I opened it. Inside was a letter and a folded piece of paper. The letter was short, just Harold telling me he loved me, that he trusted me, that whatever happened, he knew I would be okay. The folded paper was something else. It was a copy of a property deed. Harold had bought a small storage garage in the industrial part of town years ago. Said he wanted a place to work on projects. I thought he had sold it before he passed, but the paper said otherwise. It was still under his name, and mine. I stared at it for a long time. That night, I asked Clara if I could use the center's computer. I searched the address. It was a few miles away, still standing, still listed under our names. The next morning, I took 2 buses and walked the rest of the way. The building was nothing special, just a single garage with a metal door and a dusty lock. But when I opened it, my knees almost buckled. Inside were Harold's tools, his workbench, boxes of things he had saved. Everything smelled of sawdust and oil. It was like he had just stepped out for lunch and never came back. I sat on the wooden stool by the bench and cried. Not just because of Harold, but because this forgotten place felt more like home than anything I'd had in the past 5 years. Over the next few days, I started cleaning it out. It took time, but each box I sorted, each shelf I wiped, felt like I was picking up pieces of myself. Clara helped me get in touch with a local charity that provided refurbished furniture. A small cot, a mini fridge, a used table and chair. It wasn't a home, in the traditional sense, but I could lock the door. I had electricity. I had a place to sleep. It was mine. I started sewing again. I had an old portable machine that Rachel hadn't wanted when she remodeled the house. I used leftover fabric from the charity and made aprons, pillowcases, and tote bags. Clara let me sell a few at the church market. Little by little, people started asking if I could make custom pieces. It didn't pay much, but it was enough to buy groceries and keep the lights on. I didn't tell Rachel where I was. I didn't call. I figured if she had something to say, she'd find me. She didn't. But one afternoon, while I was organizing some fabrics, I got a visit from someone else. It was a man in a blue shirt and khakis, late 30s. He looked nervous. "Are you Mrs. Hendricks?" he asked. "Yes," I said cautiously. He held out an envelope. "You've been served," he said, then walked away. Inside was a letter from Jonathan's lawyer. He was suing me. He was claiming damages for the broken vase. I sat there holding that envelope for a long time. The papers were printed on thick stock, too formal for something so ridiculous. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. I read the letter again, slowly, making sure I wasn't misinterpreting anything. But the words didn't change. Jonathan was suing me for $98,300. He claimed the vase I broke was part of a rare European collection and that I was negligent. According to the letter, my carelessness had caused him emotional distress and financial hardship. He wanted damages. He wanted compensation. He wanted to humiliate me. I read through the attachments. His lawyer included photos of the vase, purchase receipts, even an inflated appraisal. Everything was worded to make me sound like a reckless intruder. Like I had no place in that house to begin with. It wasn't just about the money. It was a message. He wanted to make sure I stayed gone, make sure I didn't forget my place. I didn't know what to do at first. I hadn't had a lawyer since Harold handled our wills. I had no income, no property aside from the storage garage. Clara found me sitting in the corner of Grace House that evening, still holding the envelope. She took one look at my face and asked, "What happened?" I handed her the papers. She read in silence for several minutes, then let out a slow breath. "He's really doing this?" I nodded. "Can he win?" She didn't answer right away. "That depends. But I know someone, a legal aid attorney. Her name's Teresa. I'll call her." 2 days later, I met with Teresa at her cramped office above a secondhand bookstore. She was in her late 40s, sharp, with a no-nonsense voice, and a stack of files that never seemed to shrink. She read the letter and snorted halfway through. "This is absurd," she said. "Can he take anything from me?" Teresa shook her head. "You don't have anything to take. That garage isn't worth what he's claiming. And you don't have income. But he's banking on intimidation. He wants to scare you into a settlement." I didn't say anything. "Don't sign or respond to anything without me," she said. "Let me handle this." That was the first time in weeks I felt like I could breathe. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about how far things had gone. Jonathan wasn't just washing his hands of me. He was making sure I knew I was unwanted, unimportant, disposable. Rachel hadn't even called. Not once. Not even after the lawsuit. And that silence hurt more than anything written on legal paper. One morning, while cleaning the sewing area I had set up in the garage, I found an old folder Harold had labeled Household. Tax. I opened it without thinking and flipped through until I found something that stopped me cold. It was the original transfer documents for the money from the sale of our house. After Harold passed, I sold the house for $237,000. I gave Rachel and Jonathan $140,000 to help with their new place. I never asked for it back. It was their future, their investment. The documents were signed by me, the transfer confirmed, and there, in Rachel's handwriting, a note, received from Mom to cover down payment and renovations. Will not require repayment. It wasn't legal, but it was proof. Acknowledgement. I took a photo of it and sent it to Teresa. She replied in less than 5 minutes. "Keep that safe." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the edge of the cot and stared at the letter again, the lawsuit, the numbers, the cold language. I imagined Jonathan reading it with his lawyer, deciding how to phrase everything so that it would sting. He wanted to bury me in shame, but I wasn't going to let him. The next day, I brought the transfer papers and the photo to Teresa. She added them to the file. "We'll file a response. No settlement." She said it like it was final. The process dragged for weeks. I continued sewing, slowly gaining customers. Clara introduced me to a woman who owned a small boutique, and she agreed to sell my aprons and table runners on consignment. I made just enough to keep gas in the car and a little food in the mini fridge. Then, one afternoon, Teresa called. "He's pushing. His lawyer's threatening court." I asked, "What happens if it goes to court?" "You show up. You tell the truth, and I do the rest." The hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday. I wore my cleanest shirt and a pair of old slacks. That didn't fit like they used to. Clara drove me to the courthouse. When I walked into the courtroom, I didn't see Jonathan at first. He was sitting behind his attorney, talking quietly. He didn't look at me when I sat down. Rachel wasn't there. I kept my hands folded in my lap and waited. The judge was a woman, probably in her 50s. She read through the file silently, flipping pages while everyone sat in silence. Then she looked at me. "Mrs. Hendricks," she said, "do you have any statements before we begin?" I nodded and stood. My knees shook a little. "I lived with my daughter and her husband for 5 years. I helped raise their children. I cleaned their house. I cooked meals. I gave them $140,000 from the sale of my home to help them start their life in that house." I paused. "I broke the vase by accident. I didn't lie. I didn't hide it. But now I'm being sued like a stranger who barged into their home and destroyed something on purpose." Teresa stood next and handed the judge the transfer documents. The judge took them, read the handwritten note, and looked back at Jonathan. "Mr. Hendricks, is it accurate that your mother-in-law gave you $140,000 toward your home?" Jonathan shifted in his seat. His lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we're not disputing that transaction. Our claim—" "I've read your claim," the judge interrupted. "And this court finds the response from the defendant to be both reasonable and supported. There is no evidence of malicious intent, and the financial context of the relationship makes this claim look retaliatory at best." Jonathan's lawyer tried to object. The judge raised her hand. "Dismissed, with prejudice, and Mr. Hendricks will cover all court fees related to this case." The gavel hit the wood, and that was it. Jonathan didn't look at me as he walked out of the courtroom. I didn't chase after him. Outside the building, Clara hugged me. You did it. No, I said. He did this to himself. Later that night, I sat back in the garage, sewing another apron by the yellow light of a small lamp. The air was cool. The streets were quiet. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel ashamed. He tried to turn me into a villain, but all he did was show everyone who he really was. After the court hearing, I thought it would be over. I expected silence, distance, maybe awkwardness if we ever crossed paths again, though I doubted that would happen. But 2 days later, something unexpected happened. Rachel called. I stared at the phone when her name appeared. I hadn't heard her voice since the day I left the house. Not after the vase, not after the lawsuit, not even when I filed my response through Teresa. I let it ring. She called again 2 hours later. The third time I answered. Mom, she said, her voice tight. I didn't know Jonathan was going to do that. I didn't respond. I swear I didn't know, she repeated. I could hear something in her voice, panic maybe or embarrassment, but I didn't trust it yet. What do you want, Rachel? She hesitated. I thought maybe we could talk, in person. I looked around at the space I was sitting in, a sewing machine balanced on an old desk, folded fabric stacked in a wire basket. My whole life compressed into one dusty garage. Why? I asked. Because I miss you, she said. I didn't believe her. I'm not sure I miss you, I said. That stunned her into silence. Eventually she asked, could we just meet for coffee? 1 hour, please. I said yes, not because I was ready to talk, but because part of me needed to see her face. I needed to know what she looked like now, after everything she'd let happen. We met at a diner halfway between her house and the industrial strip where I lived. She arrived late, looking thinner than before. Tired. She didn't wear makeup and her hair was pulled into a messy knot. She looked older than she should have at 38. She didn't hug me. I was glad she didn't try. I ordered coffee, I said. She nodded and slid into the booth across from me. Her hands fidgeted with the napkin. I didn't approve of what Jonathan did, she started. But you didn't stop it either, I said. She looked away. I thought he was just trying to scare you. I didn't think he'd go through with it. That makes it worse. She didn't argue. I sipped my coffee and waited. He's angry, she said. About a lot of things. Work has been hard. He's under pressure. That's not my problem anymore. She nodded again. The kids ask about you, she said. Especially Ryan. I flinched at the sound of his name. I hadn't thought about the boys much lately. I couldn't. It hurt too much. I helped raise them. I sat at their school plays, helped with science projects, bandaged scrapes, and kissed foreheads when they were sick. Then one day, I was gone, and no one asked why. I didn't know what to tell them, she said. You could have told them the truth. She didn't respond. Just picked at the corner of the napkin. Then she pulled out a small envelope from her purse. What's that? I asked. She pushed it across the table. It's a check. Not for the full amount, but it's what I can give. Back now. For the money from the house, I know it's late. I didn't touch it. Why now? I asked. Her eyes watered. Because when the judge said Jonathan's case looked retaliatory, it hit me. I realized how far we've let things go. I'm ashamed. I believed her, at least that part. Do you know where I live now? I asked. She shook her head. In a garage. An actual garage. The one your father used for his tools. That's where I sleep. Her face dropped. I sit there every night, sewing aprons to sell at markets. That's how I survive. Meanwhile, you live in a house I helped pay for, and neither of you thought twice before kicking me out. You didn't call. You didn't ask if I had food. You let him sue me. I'm sorry, she whispered. You should be, but that doesn't fix anything. She sat in silence. After a few minutes, she picked up the check and folded it back into her purse. I understand, she said quietly. If you don't want anything to do with us. I nodded. I don't. Not right now. She stood up. Slowly. Her hands were shaking. If you change your mind, I won't. She didn't argue. She just walked out of the diner. I sat there for a long time after she left. I wasn't angry, not like before. I wasn't crying either. I was just tired. Back at the garage that night, I found a note slipped under the door. It was from Ryan, my oldest grandson. Grandma. Mom said she saw you today. She told me not to write, but I wanted to. I miss you. I don't care about the vase. I remember when you used to pick me up from school and we'd get ice cream without telling Mom. I miss that. Please write back. Love, Ryan. The handwriting was messy, but honest. I sat down at the sewing table and read the note over and over. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in a box where I kept Harold's old letters. The next day, I wrote, Ryan back. I didn't mention his mother or Jonathan. I just told him I missed him too, that I was doing okay, that I was sewing again, and that maybe, someday, he could come visit the garage and see what I'd made. A week later, Clara called me into her office. There's someone here who wants to speak to you, she said. It was Jonathan. He was standing outside the church building, arms crossed, face pale. I didn't say anything. He started talking fast. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Look, I was angry. It wasn't personal. You sued me, I said flatly. He nodded. I know. I regret it. I stared at him. Do you regret what you did, or that you lost? He didn't. Answer. I turned to go. Wait, he said. Rachel's been a mess. She cries every night. Then she should have thought of that before. I just came to say I was wrong, he said. That's all. I paused. Then I said, good, and I walked away. That night I got a phone call from the boutique owner. She wanted to expand the apron line into handmade tablecloths and oven mitts, said customers were asking for sets. She wanted to feature my name on the tags. It was the first time someone asked to put my name on anything since Harold passed. I hung up and smiled. Let them regret. I was moving forward. 3 weeks passed after Jonathan showed up at the church. I didn't hear from him again. Rachel didn't call either. Ryan wrote once more. A simple letter asking if I'd gotten his last one. I wrote back again. I kept the letters short, but honest. I didn't tell him I was still living in the garage. I just said I was working, I had a project, and I was okay. The boutique orders were growing. Clara helped me create a simple catalog, a few pages printed at the community center printer with prices and photos of the aprons, oven mitts, and tablecloths I had started making. I didn't have a brand or a logo, just my name on a tag, stitched, by hand. One day, while I was finishing a spring pattern for the boutique, Clara came into the garage holding her phone. You should sit down, she said. I wiped my hands and sat on the stool. Someone sent this to the church's email. She turned the screen toward me. It was a photo of the front of Rachel's house. The front lawn was covered in a white banner with red spray paint. Across it, gold diggers and elder abusers live here. My stomach dropped. Clara tapped the screen. There's more. She flipped through screenshots of social media posts. A woman from the boutique had shared my story about being kicked out after breaking a vase, the lawsuit, and how I'd started sewing in a garage. She didn't mention names, but it had gone viral in the local community. Comments piled in. People guessed who it was. Someone figured out the address. I stared at the screen. I never told her to do this. Clara sat beside me. I know. But it's out there. Now, for a moment, I wasn't sure how I felt. Part of me was sick over it. Another part didn't feel sorry. Not entirely. That afternoon, Rachel called again. This time I answered. What did you do? She snapped. I didn't do anything. Then, why is our house on the internet? Why are people messaging me at work? I stayed quiet. I've lost 2 clients, she said. People are calling me a monster. You stood there and let your husband sue me. It was a mistake, she said, her voice trembling. We were under stress. Yes. That excuse is old, Rachel. She took a breath. Mom, please. Just take the post down. Tell people it's not true. It is true. Not like that. It's exactly like that. There was a pause. We can't go anywhere, she said. People are yelling things in front of the kids. I kept my voice calm. Did you ever think about where I was sleeping after you kicked me out? Silence. Did you think about whether I had food, medicine, a roof? I didn't expect it to get that bad, she whispered. No, you didn't think at all. She sighed. I'm not calling to fight. I want to fix this. You can't. I was about to hang up, but then she said, would you come talk to the boys? They've been asking. I think seeing you might help. I didn't answer right away. They miss you, Mom. It didn't change what she'd done, but they were kids. They didn't make these choices. I'll come, I said, but not to your house. She agreed to meet at a park near the church that Saturday. When I arrived, Ryan and Jake were already there, sitting on the bench near the playground. Ryan stood up when he saw me and ran over. He hugged me without hesitation. Jake followed. He was taller than I remembered, more serious. Grandma, Ryan said, are you mad at us? No, I said. Never. He held onto my arm as we sat down. Rachel stood nearby, watching. She looked worn out. Jonathan wasn't there. Ryan pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. It was a drawing of a woman in a cape, standing in front of a house with a sewing machine. He pointed. That's you. I laughed quietly. You gave me a cape? You're like a sewing superhero. I took the picture and folded it carefully into my purse. We talked for about 30 minutes. Nothing serious. Just school, friends, the dog they adopted, how Jake had started guitar lessons. Rachel didn't say much. She just let me talk to them. When it was time to leave, Ryan hugged me again. Will you come back? Maybe. He didn't argue. He just nodded. Rachel stayed behind as they walked toward the car. She turned to me. Thank you. I nodded. Don't expect anything. I don't, she said. But I want you to know something. I waited. We're selling the house. That surprised me. Why? Jonathan's reputation is ruined. He left his job. No one wants to work with him anymore. The lawsuit became public record. People connected the dots. I said nothing. We can't afford the mortgage, so we're starting over. She paused. Maybe it's what we deserve. I didn't confirm or deny it. She looked down. I've been thinking about what you said, about where you slept. I didn't know. You didn't ask? I'm sorry. I know. She looked up. Would you ever consider— No, I interrupted. She nodded slowly. I'll write to the boys, I said. But I won't be part of your life again. Not like before. Her eyes welled up, but she didn't argue. I understand. I turned and walked back toward the garage. When I got there, I opened Ryan's drawing again. The superhero cape made me smile. It didn't make everything okay, but it was something. 2 days later, the boutique owner asked if I wanted to teach a basic sewing class to a group of senior women at the community center. I said yes. The first class had 5 women, all around my age. Some of them hadn't sewn since they were young. Some never had. We worked with donated fabric and laughed a lot. That night, I sat alone in the garage. I made a pot of tea on the small electric burner and thought about everything that had happened. From the moment I dropped that vase to the courtroom, to the banner on Rachel's lawn, to the look in Ryan's eyes when he hugged me. They had tried to erase me, but I was still here. The first check from the boutique came in a plain envelope. I didn't expect much, but when I opened it, I had to sit down. $1,735. It wasn't a fortune, but for me, it was independence. Rent money for a better place, groceries, a real bed. It meant I wouldn't have to worry about running out of thread, or whether the mini fridge would hold through the summer heat. I called Clara first. She came to the garage within the hour, and we both stood there, looking at the check like it was a museum piece. Do you know what this means? She asked. I can buy a new pair of shoes, I said. She laughed, but I wasn't joking. I used that check to rent a small studio apartment not far from Grace's house. It was just one room with a kitchenette and a bathroom the size of a closet, but it had a window facing the street and clean walls I could paint. The first night I slept there, I cried. Not from sadness, just from relief. I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd been holding in until I finally had 4 walls to call my own. I kept sewing. The boutique orders doubled, then tripled. A small blog wrote about my aprons, then a bigger one. Soon I had emails coming in from people asking to buy directly. Clara helped me set up a basic website. I learned how to print shipping labels, how to handle taxes. I started waking up with purpose again. Ryan kept writing. His letters were shorter now, sometimes just a joke or a drawing, but I read every one twice. He never asked about his parents. I never brought them up. We had our own quiet understanding. One Saturday morning, I walked to the local cafe for breakfast. The waitress, a girl in her 20s, smiled at me. "You're the apron lady, right?" I nodded slowly. "My aunt bought one of your sets," she said. "Says it's the only thing she wears in the kitchen now." That stuck with me. Not because of the compliment, but because for the first time in a long while, I was known for something good, not for being Rachel's mother or Jonathan's burden, not for being a woman who had fallen on hard times, just for something I made with my own hands. A few weeks later, I got another letter. This one wasn't from Ryan. It was from Jonathan. It was short, Elaine, I won't make excuses. I was wrong. About everything. I hurt you in ways I don't think I fully understood until now. I've been in therapy. Rachel, too. We're not together anymore. She moved out with the boys. I'm trying to fix myself, but I'm not writing to ask you for anything. I just wanted to say that what I did to you was unforgivable. But I hope you find peace. You deserve it. Jonathan, I read it once and put it in the drawer. I didn't feel anything. No satisfaction, no anger, just quiet. And that was fine. Later that week, Clara handed me an invitation. It was for a neighborhood arts fair. They were looking for local artisans to do short presentations, sewing, woodworking, painting. She told them about me. They want you to give a short demo on how to stitch by hand, she said. Basic stuff, 20 minutes. I didn't answer. Right away. They'll pay, she added. I accepted. The fair was held at the public library. They gave me a folding table and 2 chairs. I brought 3 aprons, some scraps of cloth, needles, thread. I thought maybe a few curious women would stop by. Instead, the seats filled up fast. And then people stood around the table. I don't know how many. Maybe 15, maybe 30. Some took notes. Some asked questions. One woman cried, said her mother used to sew, and she hadn't touched a needle since she passed. When it was over, someone from the local paper asked to take my picture. I almost said no. But then I thought of the days I sat alone in that garage, cold and ashamed, wondering how I'd ever make it. So I smiled for the photo. 2 days later, I was on the front page of the community section with the headline, From Rock Bottom to Reclaimed Dignity, the Apron Lady of Linwood. The article never mentioned Rachel or Jonathan. Just me, my story, my work. That same week, I received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a photo. It was of Rachel. She was sitting on a picnic blanket with Jake and Ryan. The boys looked happy. She looked different. Tired, but softer. On the back of the photo was one line, written in her handwriting. I know you don't want us back. I just wanted you to see we're trying. I placed the photo on the shelf beside Harold's old toolbox. I didn't write back. Some things stay broken, but not everything needs to be repaired to have value. That night, I walked to the window of my studio. The lights from the street spilled into the room. The sewing machine sat on the desk, fabric cut and pinned for the next batch. My tea was warm. The radio played something soft in the background. I wasn't rich. I wasn't famous, but I was free. They never expected that breaking me would be the best thing they ever did, and I never expected that picking up a needle again would rebuild my life. But here I am, still standing, still stitching, and no one gets to tell me where I belong ever again.